92%. 92% of responders say that risks like delays and temperature excursion and product loss have increased.
Pharma companies are now expecting their logistics service providers to move away from a vendor relationship to a strategic partner, right? They are not satisfied just with tracking or reporting anymore, right? It has to be more, right? Your reporting is of the past, right? You of course want to know when things go wrong, but you want information before things go wrong. Their job is moving cargo, right? Moving freight. But it is not only moving freight, right? And especially for pharma, it's all about, helping design supply chain, right? Helping de-risk the supply chain.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Connected Cold Chain Podcast. My name is Michael Haley with SkyCell. Today, we'll speak about how to move from a service provider to a strategic risk partner. And to explore this topic, I have the delight to introduce my guest today, Kunal Punjabi from DSV.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael, right? And thank you for having me here, right? It's exciting to be here and talk about, cold chain, which is very close to my heart, right? So I've been in the forwarding industry for almost 25 years now, and I've dedicated 15 years to cold chain, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare, right? So this is a topic I'm really passionate about. So, thank you for having me here.
I'm really thrilled to have you. You're one person that could be really instrumental in sharing with our friends and participants out there of what is connected cold chain within the forwarding industry and the pharma clients. So with no further ado, we're going to jump right into this if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Let's do this. So quick introduction of what we're saying about today. A recent WR study based on insights from 120 senior leaders across pharmaceutical companies and freight forwarders highlights that infrastructures and growing tension in temperature-controlled supply chains, despite significant investments in infrastructure and monitoring technologies, 92% of responders say that risks like delays and temperature excursion and product loss have increased. Interesting. At the same time, 61% believe reliability has improved only marginally over the past 10 to 15 years. Those findings suggest that even with better tools and infrastructure, the industry is still struggling today to fully close the gap between investments and real reliability. So against that backdrop, let me start with this. What are pharma companies really looking for in a logistics partner today, beyond just getting the job done at the right price?
That's a great question, right? So I would start off by saying, executing it properly, having operational strength, and of course a competitive price, right? That's a given, right? Pharma companies are now expecting their logistics service providers to move away from a vendor relationship to a strategic partner, right? So there's a lot they expect, right? Especially in the pharma industry, given ultimately it's all about the patient, right? So I think the key requirements or the key expectations are first, end-to-end supply chain visibility, right? That's a prerequisite, right? I think pharma companies want to have information, real-time visibility, what's happening, if there are any changes with the ETA, if there's any disruption which is going to happen, to get that information proactively, right? They are not satisfied just with tracking or reporting anymore, right? It has to be more, right? You need to bring in predictive analytics, being able to keep them informed and help mitigate some of the issues before it becomes a problem to the patient, right? The other thing which is very important is quality and compliance, right? Given the regulatory landscape, right, that the pharma companies operate in, I think it's equally important that the partners they work with know what they're doing, right? They want all their logistics service providers to be GDP compliant. They should know what they're doing. They should have proper knowledge about CAPA management, doing analysis, root cause, and of course, right, having a quality process and system in place. With this, it's also important, which is the third aspect, is having infrastructure, right, which is a cold chain infrastructure, which is, temperature control warehouses, temperature control handling capabilities, QMS system, having people who are trained, who can guide them with different packaging, what needs to be done. This is key, right? And I think the other last element is, this is basically, risk mitigation and helping them being more resilient, right? We also, after COVID, and there have been numerous different black swan events, right, where, they've wanted their forwarders to step up, bring resilience to their supply chain, right? Be it moving cargo through different airports, doing different solutions, bringing in charter aircrafts, or doing something out of the box, right? So I think these are the key requirements that pharma companies expect from their forwarders at this time.
I want to go back to a topic that you've said. There's consolidating a couple subjects here in what you're sharing of compliance, regulatory, visibility. This leads me to the topic of technology. And at DSV, you guys are really separating from the industry and differentiating yourself from competitors in the space of technology. Could you share with the viewers a little bit on how DSV is using technology to differentiate themselves for visibility, for regulatory bodies, understanding risk, and putting that quality piece that really separates your organization from others in the industry?
Absolutely, right. So I think, as I mentioned before, right, this is very, very important for the pharma customers, right? So definitely, as the logistics leader and the largest logistics company in the world, right, we are thinking what we can do to be not only the largest freight forwarder in the world, but also the best in the healthcare industry, right? So the key here is, using devices, having EOT devices connected, right? Having connectivity through ERP systems, the APIs, being able to give visibility on a real-time basis, right? It could be temperature, right? It could be if there's an excursion, right? What is the exposure to humidity, right? What is being done, right? And again, I think the key here is all this information helps a forwarder or us being able to take action, do contingency planning before things impact the patient, right? So I think the key here is, using different devices, having systems which give real-time information, and at the same time, right, being able to provide and flow this information into our customers' ERP systems.
Yeah, that connected ecosystem to really make those challenging decisions when time is of the essence is a real differentiator for your all's organization.
Absolutely, right. Yeah. I think, reporting is good to have, right? But it's good to have that information beforehand so that you can take corrective action, right, before things go bad or wrong, or again, right, before the product loses its efficacy and quality doesn't allow you to release it in the market.
Yeah, great. Okay, so on to our next question here, and I really enjoy this next question. I think it's going to give us a lot of open dialogue to share on. What does it actually take to move from reactive to support to becoming a proactive risk advisor for pharma?
I would say the first thing that is important to change from reactive to proactive is a mindset, right? It's a mindset of the people who are working for you, right? That's key, right? The other element is data usage. You want to make sure you use data efficiently, right? Data is priceless, right, these days. So you want to make sure you use data effectively. And of course, right, engagement with the customer, right? Being able to talk to them, right? All this operational data is important, but being able to use this data proactively, right? So I think, as a forwarder, right, what we are doing, and I think this is key to become more proactive, right, rather than just being reactive, is build real-time visibility, right? You need to be having, systems which provide you all information, right? Be it real-time tracking, as I mentioned before, right? Temperature information, humidity information, right? Having tools which will help you with predictive analytics, right? That's the key, right? And as I mentioned before, right? Reporting is of the past, right? You of course want to know when things go wrong, but you want information before things go wrong, right? It needs to be more of predictive analytics, which help you take decisions in a proactive way, right? The other important thing that is needed is having control towers, right? Because you want someone monitoring these shipments 24/7, right? Making sure they are following the different milestones, and if they don't go as per the the process that is set up, or the or the process that needs to be followed, right? There needs to be steps to put in, escalation, right? What do we need to do, right? What needs to be done to mitigate the loss, right? What needs to be done to take corrective action, right? I think this is key. And also one important element is being able to plan for anything which is going to happen, right? Again, we have seen a lot of disruptions in the market, right? And again, we cannot predict what is going to happen, right? But to be able to follow it closely and provide that information to our customers proactively is going to be a key, right? To move away from being reactive versus proactive, right, in the future.
I love that answer. It's a great answer. And there's a few things I want to expand on here. There's some connective tissue between our question 1 and question 2, right? And this is surrounding technology and being that proactive advisor. And I want to come back to the topic of data. Within DSV, what technologies that you guys use to separate yourselves from the industry for that proactive data experience to set up a customer's lane to ensure that visibility beforehand, before experiences can take place, so that you can have that conversation with your customer to say, this lane looks successful, but this lane may have a little bit of risk. Expand on, how do you guys use data to manage these conversations with your customers long before shipments are executed?
Absolutely, right. So I think the key here is, making sure you do a lane risk assessment, right, before your shipment starts moving, right? So for any new lane that we implement for any customer, we do a detailed risk assessment, right? Again, we use one of our partners, Validate, which, of course, right, is someone that we've been using for many years, and we have seen the technology improve, right? So what we do is we make sure there's a lane risk assessment done for every point pair, right? Using different scenarios, summertime, wintertime schedule, right? Airlines change their schedules as well, right? Along with the temperature change, the airlines also change their schedules, right? There could be more flights in summer, less flights in winter, right? So making sure you take that into consideration as well. You also want to make sure that the packaging that your customer is using, right? That is, that has enough buffer built in if things go wrong, right? Because things always go wrong, right? Again, you want to be making sure that there is a buffer in, right? And so if there is, we see a pattern, right? That, hey, certain airports, there's a congestion during this time, right? Hey, use different airports, right? Have backup or a secondary option if possible, right? And if the packaging is too tight when it comes to the the transit time, see if there's an alternative option which is available, or make sure that where this is being routed, right? Those airports have temperature controlled rooms where we can make sure that it's being put in temperature controlled environment so that it helps with the efficacy of the product and extending the life of the packaging.
I love using data and technology to really be agile in decisions long before the shipments take place, to really have those conversations with your clients to say, we see this, we see that. Do you agree? And really being collaborative in that approach to be successful long before that shipment engages in a transit lane. That's powerful.
Absolutely, right. Again, we would take weeks of preparation, making sure everything is documented, all SOPs are created, lane risk assessments are done before you start with anything, right? Because, especially these high value pharma shipments, right? It's not only the value, but it's at the patient, right? At the end of it, there is a patient, right? You want to make sure everything is set in a way that there is, minimum chances of failure, right? I can't say 0%, but there is really minimum chance of failure, right? The way, we set up this before it goes live.
And if we see anything with today's experiences, supply chains are getting more and more difficult to overcome, right? So
absolutely. There's new challenges every day, right?
Every day. Yeah, indeed. Okay, so this leads me to my third question. This is a very interesting question and one I'm really excited to ask. It's got a little challenge to it, right? So where do you think freight forwarders still underestimate the role they can play strategically in pharma supply chains today?
Great question, right? So again, right, being in the forwarding industry for almost 25 years now, right? I think, the assumption, right, or even the freight forwarders thing, right? Their job is moving cargo, right? Moving freight. But it is not only moving freight, right? And especially for pharma, it's all about, helping design the supply chain, right? Helping de-risk the supply chain, right? And being able to optimize the supply chain, right? I think these are three key areas which forwarders play a role in. And this is not only the forwarders, right? But also pharma companies are not using their freight forwarders as much as they could potentially, right? Given, the information that freight forwarders have, right? So I think in my assessment and my experience, right, pharma companies need to start involving their freight forwarder, for supply chain network optimization, right? Again, because, a forwarder is dealing with multiple companies in the same market, right? They know what different companies are experiencing, right? They know which are the best gateways, right? They know which are the best airlines, right? What is the best way to get the cargo there on time in an efficient way, right? So I think forwarders should be involved in it. The other thing is, product launch, right? Or going into new markets, right? I think pharma companies come to logistics in the end when they are launching a new product, right? First everything happens and then logistics comes in the end, right? I think pharma companies should involve their forwarder well in advance, right? When it comes to launching new products or going into a new market, right? Because it helps them understand from the forwarder's experience, right? What are the challenges that they have seen in this market before, right? Because someone else must have gone there before, right? What are the regulatory requirements, right? What are the compliance challenges that others have faced, right? Getting this information is key. And again, right, this is where pharma could use the freight forwarder more. And I think the third element, and which is coming up now, right, is sustainability, right? I think, now pharma and all companies, right, are moving away from, or not moving away, right, moving from phase 1, phase 2 now to phase 3 of sustainability, right? And that's where, a forwarder can come in, right? First, a forwarder can give them information as to what is their CO2 footprint. That's a starting point, right? Not knowing your CO2 footprint is a big challenge, right? So forwarders can provide that. They can help you, mode optimize. They can help you use different routings to reduce your CO2 footprint. Use different aircrafts, right? Even using a different aircraft could help reduce your CO2 footprint, right? Which is, which pharma companies don't realize it, right? But the forwarder has that information and can help the pharma companies, right? And if nothing else works, there is an option of sustainable aviation fuel, right? Which pharma companies co-invest with different airlines, with shipping lines. And of course, right, sustainable aviation fuel or a sustainable marine fuel could be used to reduce the CO2 footprint, right? So again, I think it's a long way to go, both from a forwarder side, but also from the pharma industry side, right? To start using your freight forwarder, well in advance, right? And more as a partner versus just someone who is moving your freight, right, from point A to point B.
Yeah, from my past forwarding experience, I've always seen the forwarder industry as the conductor of the symphony, right? You're keeping all the different instruments of that symphony together and tuned and correct, right? And without that freight forwarder positioning, that's really chaos in the song, right? You can't create a beautiful song if you don't have someone leading all the different instruments across the symphony. So that's really where the forwarder plays their important part of keeping everybody that's in focus as a part of vendors and supply within the same cadence and the same direction. It plays a very, very important part.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to go back to one topic that you spoke of here that is, a topic that we see more and more spoke about. It's really taken some time to take connection, but I think as time is prevailing, it's being spoken more and more of, and that's the term sustainability. When sustainability first came out, I don't think people really knew how to pronounce it or even spell it, or even knew what it applied to, right? But as we've moved through the years and fast forward today, it seems that sustainability is becoming more of a topic that's discussed. And even now being positioned in RFPs and RFQs and QBRs with our clients. So I'd like for you to take a few extra minutes here and kind of expand on DSV and the projection or the outlook for sustainability within your organization through the upcoming years. If you could help share with our viewers, what does that look like from a DSV perspective?
Sure thing, right? So again, as I mentioned before, right, now pharma companies are looking at scope 3, right? And logistics is a big component of scope 3, right? For everyone, right? And I think the key here is having the visibility, right? What is your CO2 footprint, right? So as a company, DSV is now providing the CO2 footprint to our customers, right? Again, we also have platforms where we could take information from other forwarders and give you a consolidated view of your CO2 footprint, right? This is, again, right, it does not just need to move with DSV, right? It could move with any forwarder. As long as, you're able to share that information, we can give you visibility of what your CO2 footprint is, right? I think that's the key starting point. And as I mentioned before, right, of course, there are different ways to reduce your CO2 footprint, right? First is offsetting. And of course, the other option is insetting, right? So when we talk about offsetting is basically, right, you just buy and, put money in somewhere, buy credits, and then that helps offset the CO2, you have, right? But insetting is more where you are actually making a difference to the CO2 outflow, right? Or what the CO2 footprint is, right? And this is where we as a forwarder, right, we are looking at our CO2 footprint and we are investing to reduce our CO2 footprint, right? By buying sustainable marine fuel, aviation fuel, partnerships, as I mentioned before, right? With different shipping lines and airlines. And this is where we come and support different pharma companies, right? Hey, you want to reduce your footprint, right? It's a one atmosphere, right? Even if we physically your shipment is moving from point A to B, right? Even if the fuel is not being used for that particular leg, right? The CO2 print, whatever your footprint is, right? We're going to inject that much sustainable aviation or marine fuel in the system to actually reduce the CO2 footprint, right? So I think this is key. And of course, this comes with a cost. And now companies do have a budget, right? They are spending, they are willing, because this is important, right? This is, I think, now getting, how do I say, right? A budget allocation as well from different companies. So this is what we do, right? If there is no budget, we have options where we look at the different aircrafts those are being used, right? Older aircraft has more CO2 footprint versus the new aircraft, right? So again, just being able to guide our customers, right? Which is the type of the aircraft they should be loading more, which is the routing they should be doing, will help them reduce your CO2, right? So these are different methods that we are using as a forwarder to help our customers achieve their goal to reduce their CO2 footprint.
Yeah, the monetization of CO2 is really the catalyst to change from a thought to an action, right? Until CO2 is monetized, no one really knew where to put CO2 or sustainability as a project or a focus, right? And I think nowadays we're really getting to that, how to put a dollar sign next to sustainability, and it really gets pushed and driven. And I really do have a strong appreciation for organizations like DSV and SkySail that really put a front focus on sustainability. At the end of the day, once I'm gone, I want to make sure that I leave this place, this earth, for my kids in a great place to enjoy what we enjoyed as youngsters as well too. So thanks for DSV for working so hard on that.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with your sentiment, right? We should be doing whatever we can, right, to make this, a better place, right, for the next generation.
Absolutely. Our time has come and gone, but we have time for one last question. And this question is kind of going to encapsulate the previous three questions. So feel free to kind of freestyle through this one. The final question is, to wrap things up, if an organization wants to truly be seen as a credible risk partner, what capabilities need to exist internally to make this possible?
Okay. So I would say this is a great question, right? Because again, I can take a lot of inputs from the previous questions I answered, right? But I think the key here is, having data, right? You need to have data visibility, right? Because that's a key component. The other thing is, having quality and compliance, right? You need to have quality and compliance built into your processes. You need to have a quality department. You need to have people who are trained, people who know what needs to be done, and of course, know what pharma expects, right? That's the second thing. I think the third and important thing is having control towers, right? Making sure you have control towers. I already spoke about it, right? Having people monitor shipments 24/7, make sure that, everything is moving as per the SOP, making sure, right, if things go wrong, you take action proactively rather than waiting for the end, right? So this is the other important aspect. Also very important here is, having a consultative approach with your customers, right? Again, as forwarders, we have a lot of data, a lot of operations, information, but you need to have that strategic customer engagement, right? Engage with your customers, right? Share this information, right? How you can help them change things, right? If you're seeing there is a pattern, right? Pattern that this airline at this time of the year is not the best, right? There are peak seasons, right? Because there are new products being launched, so there's, flux of volumes due to a new launch of products in the US, or, back to school or Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, right? So we need to be guiding our customers as to what they can do in advance, use secondary options, backup options to better be prepared for any delays, right, which could happen, right? So I think this is the key, right? Having data visibility, having control towers, as I mentioned before, right? Quality and compliance, and consultative engagement with customers.
Well, Kunal, this was a very special time to share with you from an organizational perspective like DSV and the long-standing industry experience such as yourself. It was a very special conversation. I thank you for taking the time, and I hope the viewers out there really saw and take home what I'm feeling right now from the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you again, right? I really appreciate the time. I enjoyed our discussion, and I'm sure we'll have much more to work together and collaborate, right, as partners.
Indeed. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.